What is up, everybody? Welcome to episode 5 of Faux Football. This is the very real podcast about everyone's favorite fake sport, fantasy football. I'm your host, Chu. You can follow me on Twitter at Father Dynasty and check out my website, fatherdynasty.com, where you can check out this Substack, this podcast. And of course, if you're listening to the podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, what have you, go ahead and subscribe and like over there. And also check out my rankings. There's a tab on the website that kind of brings you over to my rankings at Fantasy Pros, where I do Dynasty and then the weekly rankings throughout the season. So if you're ever interested in tuning in on a Sunday morning, getting your lineup set, go over and check those out. Today we are talking about time to tank. This is looking at a couple of players, maybe if you're getting prepared to tank in a Dynasty league, some guys that maybe you should look to trade for. Flex and Bust Out, which is the weekly segment looking at a couple of guys outside of the top 36 running backs and wide receivers to flex out. And This or That, which is, of course, a little bit of start-sit advice, and some of it's just players that I think will outperform other players. So with that being said, let's get time to tank. Everybody's doing it through the quad to the gymnasium. It is time to tank. We are about 20% through the regular fantasy football season if you have your Week 14, Week 15 playoffs starting for fantasy. Some may be creeping into Week 16 if you have just back-to-back weeks of only 4 teams making it. But all in all, I mean, if you think about some of those players, or managers, that are maybe 0-3 at this point, really consider, is it time to tank? And this is, of course, Dynasty specific. If it's for redraft, you're not really actively tanking because if the season's over, the season's over. And looking at these, it will be 2 players at each of the relevant positions for quarterback, running back, wide receiver, and tight end. One is a rookie, and one is, we'll call it a non-rookie, so a veteran, some older, some younger, but overall not a rookie. And starting first at quarterback, we're going Jackson Dart. And this is being recorded on Thursday night, actually during the Seahawks game. The Seahawks-Cardinals are playing. So Dart has not yet made his first NFL start, but that's going to be coming against the Chargers here in Week 4. And he's someone who I was high on coming out of college. I was kind of hoping he would have maybe had more of the season to kind of sit back and just kind of let the Giants go through what is a pretty brutal schedule. But Russell Wilson has clearly, the deep ball is still there. That's something he can thrive with, as you saw in Week 2, with that ridiculous showing, again, against a pretty terrible team in the Dallas Cowboys. But at the end of the day, the mobility is really not there. Him in the red zone was atrocious. So Jackson Dart, I understand getting him out there, certainly for Brian Daboll trying to save his job. Thinking of 2 trades, I go to Dynasty Daddy, dynasty-daddy.com. They have a trade database there, really helpful just to kind of see ones that, some really kind of don't match up and maybe don't fit your league, but I think it's good to see what's going on in different leagues just to get some ideas. I have 2 here. One is Jackson Dart for Quentin Johnston and a 2026 second, and the other one is Jackson Dart for Geno Smith, Calvin Ridley, and a 2027 second-round pick. Both of those, I think you're ultimately Quentin Johnston, that's kind of capitalizing on the stellar first couple of weeks that he's had. Again, he could still maintain, double-digit fantasy point value. I really thought it was going to be a lot of touchdown spike weeks in the Gabe Davis type of mold. But, man, he's looked good. Honestly, so has that entire LA Chargers passing offense. And the other one with Geno Smith, I do like Geno a lot. Again, he is a bit older, so I think you're certainly just looking at the dynasty aspect of having a younger quarterback. Again, he's also tied to Malik Neighbors. I'm excited about Cam Scatabo. I do think he's going to be an exciting piece there. An improving offensive line, that was my biggest concern actually with a tough matchup with the Chargers and a tough schedule as a whole. If this offensive line is not improving, Dart's going to be in a rough spot still, but I think he is more mobile and more kind of creative to be able to hopefully work the offense a bit better than Russell Wilson has. So Jackson Dart, definitely someone to look at if you are rebuilding. And my veteran quarterback to look at is Brock Purdy. Huge fan of Brock Purdy, believed in him ever since his very, very brief entrance later in the season after just the litany of injuries happened in San Fran. he stepped in, stepped up big. And even if you think about last season, I know he's finally paid and everything, so he's securely on the 49ers, albeit at a discount considering what a lot of quarterbacks have been getting lately. But he lost so much last season by way of a little bit of offensive line, certainly most of his weapons, and still did reasonably well from a fantasy standpoint. And he, of course, is slated to be returning here in Week 4. He missed the last 2 weeks with Mac Jones stepping in. And again, Purdy's still dealing with a lack of weaponry in terms of George Kittle is still out. Believe Ricky Pearsall and Juwan Jennings are both questionable. I think both should play, to my understanding. I know they have a couple of other guys that have been there to fill in with Kendrick Bourne and some of those guys, but they do also have Christian McCaffrey, who, for all of the talk of him being fragile and bones like glass, he seems to be doing perfectly fine, and I think we're getting that vintage Christian McCaffrey right now. Brock Purdy is someone who I think he is, again, certainly in quarterback age, very young, but he's shown us a lot in these short years that he's been the starter. And I think in the Kyle Shanahan offense, I very much like the quarterback who is decisive, has a bit of mobility, so a little bit of rushing upside there. And I think, especially when you think about dynasty, I understand wanting the big sexy names, but I think getting someone like a Brock Purdy who is a definitive top 15 quarterback, I would argue he's closer to like a back-end QB1, depending on how you scoring and that sort of thing. So those are my two guys if you're looking to tank and to rebuild your squad. Now going over to the running backs, the rookie that I've got here is Cam Skattebo, as I kind of mentioned, so pretty funny that I'm picking two Giants here. Did that completely independent of one another, so did not plan for that. But really, I'm a big Tyron Tracy fan. I'm a sucker for a converted receiver going to running back. I don't know why. But it had gone well for Tracy last season. I understand that towards the end of last season, for the latter half, a couple of more fumbles, certainly in key situations that were lost. Giants and their running backs fumbling is not a good combo, that's for sure. As we look at history there, but Cam Skattebo stepped in, and with Tracy not necessarily fumbling this season, but just not being maybe quite as effective, and also most recently in Week 3 going down with injury and could be out for a little bit. Skattebo stepped in, and it looks like he's back in college. He's just the leverage he's got with his size, how he's able to use his very bulky bruising frame. He's fast enough. I understand it's not 4.4 speed or what have you, but there's plenty of running backs that have that. I can't remember his 40 time. I thought it might have been in the 4.6s possibly, or the latter 4.5s. But he runs, getting those 10, 15, 20-yard chunk gains, or at a minimum, being able to be elusive, to truck people, easily defensive backs, to do blitz pickup, of course, and very capable as a pass catcher. So again, a lot of people were very high on him coming out of college, and it's exciting to see him getting this opportunity now. And hopefully he can kind of grow with Dart, as Dart is getting his first start here in Week 4. So Skattebo being someone who can contribute in all phases and can keep himself on the field as a in pass pro. So very excited for his prospects going forward. And two of the trades that I've got for Skattebo, and I realized I didn't say the Purdy trades either. The quick Purdy trades real quick. Brock Purdy for C.J. Stroud in a 2026 fourth, and then Brock Purdy, Ladd McConkey in a 2027 first for Joe Burrow and we have Keon Coleman, I believe. Yeah. So those Purdy ones, I'll leave that there. I know I'm already out of order here, but jumping back to Skattebo, the ones I've got, so it's Cam Skattebo for DeAndre Swift and Wan'Dale Robinson, and the other one is Cam Skattebo for a 2026 second. And these are all as of today, as of Thursday. So I really think this is a chance. I think the Skattebo hype train I could see in certain leagues, just looking at the trade database. Some of them were getting a bit out of control in terms of what people were paying to get him. So depending on your league, I'm sure some people are not by any means looking to move him, certainly at this point when he's about to get the backfield, lead the backfield, with Devin Singletary not really providing much of a threat for touches. But if you can get him, I would say go for it. Those are, again, just two trades that I found in there. There are options. Even if you have to pay a little bit more, I think it's worthwhile. But again, it depends on where your team's at. And if you're rebuilding, running back may not be the spot you're trying to do it at, but at least if you're getting someone now whose value could increase, You could then, if you are still not ready yet, you could, of course, still trade them down the road for, a bit of an increase there. And the veteran running back I'm looking at is Breece Hall. He is currently in the final year of his rookie deal. Pretty crazy. I think he's already reached that at this point. And man, it's been up and down with injury. Has played well and then has kind of fallen out of favor, at least splitting a lot of his snaps with Braylon Allen and Isaiah Davis there in New York. He is still getting a bulk of the touches, though, which I think is encouraging, but the Jets offense, Fields steps in and looks good, gets hurt. Breece Hall kind of up and down performances thus far. Do they actually trade him during the season? That was all the talk throughout the offseason, that it was going to happen before they even started, or if the team was not doing tremendously well, could they trade him during the season? Possible. Either way, it really doesn't seem like, even if he stays on the team through this year, it doesn't seem like they want to keep him after this. So regardless, I don't think he's going to be a Jet after this season, and I think that's an encouraging thing, and the hope could be that he gets the bag somewhere, or, is able to kind of choose and see where he wants to go. Hopefully a good situation where his all-around skill set can be best utilized. And a couple of the trades I've got for him here, got Breece Hall, Ricky Pearsall, and a 2026 first for Ashton Jeanty and a 2027 second. I know there's a lot of the excitement about Jeanty, and I know it's maybe fading a little bit with his subpar performances thus far. But I think if you're getting Hall, Pearsall, and a first, I think that's kind of a good way to kind of split everything up. Pearsall, someone who's on tremendous offense and who is stepping into a good role, and of course getting the first. It's always good to have a first, regardless of what you think about the draft classes. A first is still a first. And the second trade is Breece Hall and Quentin Johnston for Saquon Barkley. And that's another one where Barkley, again, a slightly slow start, certainly compared to last year. But again, he's in a tremendous offense. This is not a slight to Barkley. It's more so to get the upside of Breece Hall at a low point. And Quentin Johnston, someone who can, again, even if it kind of levels off a little bit, if you do need the production now, Hall and Johnston, in deeper leagues, you could be starting both of those guys. Or God forbid, if you want to hold on to Hall and flip Johnston in yet another trade to acquire even more assets, you could certainly do that too. And jumping over to the wide receivers to get this done a little bit quicker, the rookie, we've got Alec Eyomanor. He's in my opinion, he's the wide receiver one in Tennessee. It's been pretty underwhelming for Calvin Ridley, the elder receiver, 30-31, I want to say. And Eyomanor, he kind of struck me as just the very classic, somewhat one-dimensional outside receiver coming out of college. And yes, that's where he's been thriving in the NFL, but he has been doing well in that role. And it has not limited him necessarily. And I think it's good that he's showing promise there and he can kind of grow from that. With him, I've got two trades here. So I've got Eyomanor, Josh Jacobs, and a 2026 third for Saquon Barkley and a 2027 fourth. And I'm not planning to apparently trade Saquon away a bunch. And the second one is Eyomanor and a 2026 first for Marvin Harrison Jr. So that was a big one. I think a lot of people are souring on Marvin Harrison Jr., maybe kind of in a Ashton Jeanty type of way. I know Ashton Jeanty is still in his rookie season. Marvin Harrison had a so-so rookie season. Not terrible by any means, but I think maybe not what people were hoping for or expecting. And then he put on a bunch of muscle and then is worse at catching this season. I don't know. It's kind of bizarre. Which, again, I don't think muscle or anything or physicality maybe was necessarily a problem of his last season. But, yeah, I think McBride, for me, is the only one I really trust as a pass catcher in that offense for the Cardinals there. And looking at the veteran receiver, I've got Chris Olave. He is the target monster thus far, the PPR darling. Doesn't mean much in terms of yards and such, but he is doing his best Wan'Dale Robinson impression circa 2024. He is someone who, again, the quarterback play is pretty subpar, and the offense as a whole, and really the defense. The New Orleans Saints, in totality, not great right now. Dealing with all the salary cap issues that have culminated to this point. But I think Olave is a good building block for that offense. And I think even if he's not turning out those yards, he is someone who I think you could build around, still a younger receiver, someone who, again, if healthy, which he has been thus far, knock on wood, he's someone you want on your dynasty team. Two trades I've got for him. One is Chris Olave for Trey Benson. I think that's kind of capitalizing on Trey Benson really simply rising into the role that he currently is solely because of James Conner going down with a season-ending injury. Not a tremendous slight to Trey Benson. I'm a little leery that he is going to take over a James Conner role, and it's more so going to be he kind of does, but then Amari DiMercado is going to take a frustrating amount of touches away, or at least snaps, and I don't know what that means fantasy-wise beyond this season for Trey Benson. And the second one I've got is Chris Olave for Chris Godwin and David Njoku. Chris Godwin, of course, nearing return. He might come back in week 4. I'm not too optimistic as to what that's going to look like. I think it's going to be a bit of a slow ramp up, even if he does play in week 4. And David Njoku, I think, is still involved there in Cleveland, but nearing the end of his contract. And Harold Fannin, the rookie, stepping up in a big, big way. And I do think that Harold Fannin is the future there in the tight end room for Cleveland. And as we talk about him here, so tight ends, last but not least, Harold Fannin is the rookie I'm looking to buy. I think, thankfully, it's settled down a little bit for Fannin after a really tremendous week 1. Not that he's done like terribly, but I think it's just kind of calmed down to where I do think you can still get him. And again, I think this is a Browns offense with him. You got Judkins in the backfield, Sampson, who is not really being utilized quite as much after a great start, but Judkins is definitely the leader there. And then Judy and Tillman there. So, they need to figure out the quarterback position and a number of other things, but I think Fannin should be a mainstay for years to come. And 2 trades I've got for Fannin. So I've got Harold Fannin and Ashton Jeanty for Amarian Hampton. I think that's kind of opportunistic with Hampton stepping up big in week 3 with Najee Harris going down. But I think in the long term, again, while I was trading away Jeanty in a different trade, I think considering what that looks like with Fannin and Jeanty, I'm looking forward to doing that and to holding both of those guys, I would say, for a team that is in tanking mode. And the second one I've got is Harold Fannin for a 2026 third and a 2027 third. I think that's reasonable. I think even some people might be going Fannin for a second or Fannin for a second and a third. I'd rather not a second and a third, and I'd rather not a second, but I think it depends on how far down the road are you kicking the can and where's that second going to be. Because, of course, if you're tanking, you're not trying to trade away too many of those picks as you are actively trying to make sure they are, at worst, in the top half, if not top 3, of the 2026 rookie draft for your league. And the finale, we've got the Jake Ferguson as my veteran tight end to buy. Just re-upped his contract in Dallas. Certainly a good look right now as CeeDee Lamb is out, and you saw what Jake Ferguson's role was in his absence as he elevated to double-digit targets. Sure-handed guy, has earned that role with the Cowboys and in that offense. One that is still very run-heavy, and they're very focused on giving Javonte Williams and, to a lesser extent, Miles Sanders the ball consistently. But Jake Ferguson is still going to be involved. And again, even once CeeDee Lamb is back and Pickens is getting his touches, and so is Turpin and Tolbert and what have you, Ferguson still has a modest role of the 5 to 7 probably targets, and what he does with them is anyone's guess. But certainly in CeeDee Lamb's absence, he's someone to get. And 2 of the trades I've got, Jake Ferguson for a 2026 second, and then Jake Ferguson and a 2026 first for George Kittle and Trey Tucker. I think that latter one is certainly taking advantage of Trey Tucker's bananas week 3. I don't think that's representative of what's going to happen in the future, but I mean he's had some even some boom games last season too. So I mean I think he's important to the offense, but I think to attempt to predict multi-touchdown games for a receiver on the Raiders, it's not going to be the easiest thing in the world. And with Kittle probably coming back, I want to say it's week 6 is when he first comes available. I could definitely understand why someone's going to get Kittle, but I think if you're getting Ferguson in the first, I think that's certainly the more secure one. But that is time to tank. And next up, we've got Flex and Bust Out.
I'm going to flex and bust out of here.
I know I got to yapping on the first segment, so I'm going to get cruising here with Flex and Bust Out. This is, of course, me looking at the running back and wide receiver position and looking at players that are outside the top 36 in Fantasy Pros rankings, consensus rankings, and picking the people that I think could finish inside the top 36 for week 4. And for running back, I'm going to start out Woody Marks. He is the running back 42 going up against the Titans. I think that's his role has only grown, and it's eaten more and more into Nick Chubb's role. And I do think that it's kind of been a 1A, 1B. And I mean, Marks could overtake him. Even if he doesn't, I think he has enough of a role. I think it's intriguing to be able to slip into the top 36, so very possible. Next up, Braylon Allen, RB 45 on the week, going up against the Dolphins. Already excited for the Jets offense as a whole to go up against this Dolphins defense. And I think Braylon Allen, like I mentioned, it's Breece Hall still getting most of the touches, but Braylon Allen getting enough of the snaps that I think it's worthwhile to play him here and hope he is able to also creep into that top 36 there with certainly a little bit of his pass catching upside. And last but not least, Chris Rodriguez, RB 46, going up against the Atlanta Falcons. That running back room, I think Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt, I believe was questionable. I'm not sure the status of how likely it is that he plays or does not. Even if he plays, we saw how much they were trying to get Chris Rodriguez the ball. Was he very efficient and effective with the ball on the ground? Not necessarily. But I'm optimistic if he's getting those opportunities, something could break the right way in an offense that should also have Jaden Daniels back, and I'm optimistic for what that's going to look like. And going over to the wide receivers, Alec Ayomanor, of course, we're just talking about him from a dynasty perspective, but also from a redraft perspective. I've picked him once thus far. He is wide receiver 50 on the week, going up against the Texans. I mean, again, it feels like he's more or less usurped Calvin Ridley in terms of his effectiveness as a receiver on that team, and I think that's only going to continue here. Again, the Texans not slouches on the defensive end. But I do believe that the Titans will need to be throwing the ball early and often against. I mean, the Texans' offense, is not tremendously effective with their just turnstiles at offensive line. But I do believe that Ayomanor is going to be reasonably involved as he has been thus far. And I mean, again, Weekly has the touchdown upside with the role that he plays. Second, Trey Tucker, a wide receiver 52 on the week, going up against the Bears. No, I'm not expecting a multi-touchdown game for him, but I do think the usage for him as the speedster on the team from the receiver room, I think it's exciting, especially against a Bears defense who could get exposed here if Myers is occupied, if Bowers is going to get his. Everyone has their roles on here, but I think from a week-to-week basis, if you're kind of throwing those darts, with a lot of the matchups I was seeing and the ones kind of closer to the just outside of the top 36, I was kind of creeping into the 50s. I'm like, you know what? I'll shoot my shot with Trey Tucker. Maybe he will get a touchdown. Entirely possible. And last but not least, Tyquan Thornton, wide receiver 54 on the week. Again, loved what he did last week, and I was calling for him to be a flex option then. Calling for it again here, going up against the Ravens, though. And while that should normally instill fear, they have been a just nightmare from a fantasy perspective. Not for opponents. Opponents have loved it, but nightmare from anyone who has been playing the Baltimore Ravens defense in your leagues. And Tyquan Thornton, Xavier Worthy, I think, should be back. But I'm not really concerned with what Thornton does versus what Worthy's going to do and that impacting him at all. And Rashee Rice, of course, is not quite back yet. So I'm still optimistic for Thornton, his role in that touchdown upside in what should be possibly be a high-scoring game, with the Chiefs actually having a pretty solid defense, maybe not quite what it used to be, but certainly better than what the Ravens are putting up there. So that was me trying to cruise through flex and bust out. But yeah, those are some flex options that I would recommend, certainly as the injuries have been mounting, and soon enough we'll be hitting bye weeks. I believe it's next week, or after week 4. I think we're going to already be hitting the bye week. So certainly stay tuned for this segment, as it's going to be more and more interesting as we have bye weeks and more injuries. It's definitely going to be even more pertinent to listen to that. And last but not least, we're going into this or that.
No, this or that.
This or that. This is me looking at 2 matchups per position, and whether you want to call it start sit, depending on how far down the rankings it is, or just simply 2 players if you're deciding between the 2 who I think will do better. That's kind of how I look at this, and this is based on Fantasy Pros consensus rankings of maybe who is close or who I consider to be maybe an interesting one that I can pick. Certainly if I can pick some big names and have some juicy matchups to throw up there, I will. The first one, Going with some rookies here. Going with Jackson Dart, his first start there against the Chargers, and then Cam Ward, of course, going up against the Texans. I'm going Dart here. Neither one is a particularly easy matchup, and that Chargers defense has been looking fierce thus far, and that's also not to diminish what the offense has done, certainly from a passing perspective, and Hampton doing well. But Jackson Dart, again, was excited for him coming out of college. I think he landed in a good spot. Anyone feeding Malik Neighbors is great, but I think Dart, that will be a good connection. It won't be living and dying by the deep ball. I think they can work on stuff all over the field. Wan'Dale Robinson, I think, will be a great weapon for him. Cam Scatterbo, hopefully a healthy Andrew Thomas on the offensive line, which they will definitely need. So definitely think Dart will edge Cam Ward on that one. And next up, funny enough that these are both of the dynasty guys I was talking about. Brock Purdy going up against the Jacksonville Jaguars, and Baker Mayfield going up against the Philadelphia Eagles. It's always interesting when the Bucs and the Eagles are meeting, and I do expect the Buccaneers to put a bit of stress on the Philly defense, even though there is the issue of them not having Mike Evans, and Godwin may or may not play, but it's kind of all falling on Emeka Egbuka, and we got McMillan, and I think Sterling Shepard is still there as well, and a little bit of K-Dot, I'm sure. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see what the Buccaneers are making happen to really stretch this Philly defense. But Brock Purdy getting back from his injury, 2 weeks off, and I think Jacksonville Jaguars defense is improved as of recent years, but I think is still not too terribly imposing despite the presence of Josh Hines-Allen. I think Brock Purdy is going to do well. Hopefully enough of his weapons are healthy that he can do well, but I think he's going to be a good play this week. Maybe not necessarily a top 5 guy, but I think he has the very real possibility of finishing as a back-end QB1, at worst, closer to the top 15 there. And running back wise, looking at Josh Jacobs going up against the Dallas Cowboys, and I have him over Saquon Barkley going up against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, as I mentioned just before. And this is very much a matchup type of look. I mean, the Dallas Cowboys, for running backs, it's whoever's playing against the Cowboys. I like that. And for tight ends, it's anyone playing the Panthers, which we'll talk about in a bit here. And I really like Jacobs. I think, he's found the home there in Green Bay. I know they had a bit of an off week last week, but I think they'll get back on track here, going to play Dallas. I think they're going to win the game, still needing to keep up with the Cowboys' offense from a scoring perspective, but again, no CeeDee Lamb, so it'll be a little bit slower there. And Josh Jacobs will get his for sure. I'm expecting at least one touchdown there. And Saquon, again, it's not really a slight to Saquon necessarily, but the Buccaneers' rushing defense certainly more imposing than the Dallas's rushing defense, and I think Jacobs will have a top 12 week for sure. Saquon will also probably, but behind Jacobs. And the next running back matchup, Amarian Hampton going up against the New York Giants, and we got Ashton Jeanty, a fellow rookie, going up against the Chicago Bears. Again, Jeanty has just been slow to really produce at a high level, certainly given his draft capital. And Amarian Hampton, no offense to Hassan Haskins and company, but it's Amarian Hampton's backfield for sure at this point after Najee Harris's very rough Achilles injury there in week 3. So Hampton, I'm looking for him to get a lot of, if not most of, the touches. And it will be good for him because he also should be getting some targets as well. So I think he can be the true bell cow back there. And I understand they have been passing at a tremendous rate there in LA, but I still think Hampton's going to get plenty of touches, and ideally at least a touchdown, to where it will be fantastic for fantasy. And Jeanty will do, I think, okay, but probably still outside of the top 12, top 15. Hopefully still an RB2 though. Wide receivers, JSN, who is playing right now. I'm not watching the game, so I'm still, and my rankings are already locked in terms of me having him as a top 3 option, going up against the Falcons. And I'm sorry, not the Falcons. They're going up against the Cardinals. And Amon-Ra St. Brown going up against the Cleveland Browns. So JSN, I mean, he's just nothing but consistent, about 20 PPR fantasy points in each of the first 3 weeks, getting himself about 100 yards each week. Some easier, some tougher matchups. So overall, I mean, I think he's just been just a an absolute stud thus far. And again, that's with a new quarterback and Sam Darnold. Not a slight to Amon-Ra. Amon-Ra has just done tremendously well, some booming weeks here. But I think we'll maybe come back down to earth a little bit against the Browns. Again, I don't think he's going to create or by any means and have a horrible week, but I think JSN has just been on such a tear. I expect another, at worst, high teens performance from him, but I think it's going to get into the 20s there. And the second wide receiver one, I've got Michael Pittman going up against the LA Rams and Brian Thomas Jr. going up against the San Francisco 49ers. Taking Pittman in this one also. Brian Thomas Jr. and the Jags offense as a whole, I don't know what to say. I mean, it's baffling. You got Liam Cohen, you got Trevor Lawrence, who I feel like is just never, you get that generational label and it's just, how do you ever live up to it? And I don't think that's his fault by any means. He's been productive and successful in many of his stops, but it's just not, I think, what a lot of people were hoping for, especially with this new offensive guru going there. Brian Thomas having a booming rookie season. You have Travis Hunter. You have a lot of good weapons there, and it's just not working out tremendously well. And going up against the San Francisco defense, who is now without Bosa, who tore his knee up, and they've had other injuries as well. But they do have arguably the best linebacker in the game at the moment in Fred Warner. And Pittman going up against a very tough LA Rams defense as well. But I think what they've been able to do with Indy is a very balanced and productive defense, and Pittman has been a big part of that. So I'm going Pittman to edge out Brian Thomas Jr. And last but not least, the tight ends. So Jake Ferguson going up against the Green Bay Packers and Tucker Kraft going up against the Dallas Cowboys. Of course, this is these guys playing one another. Tucker Kraft, I was big on him in the offseason, talking about his opportunity to, in my opinion, he was the only one that I was interested in as a pass catcher in Green Bay. I thought he was the best one to get for fantasy, for dynasty, what have you. And was a bit hobbled with an injury, was thought to be more serious, but played last week. Again, questionable, but I think is slated to play again this week. And Jake Ferguson, by all accounts, healthy, ready to roll. And, of course, CeeDee Lamb's absence is going to be Jake Ferguson's benefit. And I'm taking Jake Ferguson in this one. Just the volume is going to be crazy with likely double-digit targets again, ideally a touchdown. And Kraft is incredibly explosive player who doesn't necessarily need the double-digit targets to be productive from a fantasy standpoint, getting touchdowns and such. But I think Jake Ferguson from a PPR standpoint is just the one to have this week. And the final one here, Hunter Henry going up against the Carolina Panthers and TJ Hawkinson going up against the Pittsburgh Steelers. I'm going Hunter Henry. Carson Wentz, I think, was the steadying force as a competent thrower of the football for TJ Hawkinson and company with Justin Jefferson and such. But again, like I mentioned, with running backs going up against the Cowboys, I've also got tight ends going up against the Carolina Panthers, and that is Hunter Henry. Again, coming off of a tremendous week. I'm not saying that will happen necessarily, but pretty underwhelming weapons for Drake May to throw to on the outside. So I think when you look at what Hunter Henry offers as a stable, steadying force at the tight end position, I like his upside, and I like the possible opportunity for a touchdown as well. So see him as being a very high-end option this week and to outperform TJ Hawkinson. So all in all, that is this or that. And with that being said, that is this week's episode. But before I officially end it, I want to let you know that you can check out fatherdynasty.com. And that is the website for my Substack, Faux Football Substack. That is the Substack with the articles, and I have the link to the rankings as well. It's this podcast, whether you're listening either through the website and Substack or you're listening through Spotify, Apple Podcasts, what have you. Anywhere and everywhere you're enjoying anything I'm doing, or at least listening to it and appeasing me, I appreciate it. Like and subscribe wherever you can. Definitely love any and all thoughts and feedback and what have you, and you can check me out on Twitter at Father Dynasty. So everyone out there, have a great week 4, and if it's time to tank, consider that. But in the meantime, compete and have a great week 4.